She's like a computer genius.
I know that life has made you feel bad about yourself. I know that some of the things you've been through has made you feel bad about yourself. But
is it that one? Or is it, oh, it's that one. Sorry.
And remember to put the commercial break so that it'll play some random music to the YouTube, so it's not playing whatever we're playing.
You had it. That was good, right? Yep. The video's off now.
Does that got everybody all through?
I think so.
Well, we can't see right now because he's doing something, but we'll check it.
You hot?
It's just got.
What camera is that?
I have to sit like this, you know, kind of.
This one?
I guess that's that view. And then this one I need to turn a little bit, don't I?
I guess. A little bit more to the, yeah, like right there. We're right there. Hey Carlos, where is so is it already live? It's not live.
It is live.
Oh, it's live right now. They can see us. Okay, and then where is the link that we can share?
We have to go to our YouTube.
Don't worry about it for me if that's why you're trying to.
No, it's for me too.
Oh.
So I can share it on my Facebook. Ooh.
Just copy that and put it on your Facebook.
Okay, thank you. How are we gonna copy that and put it on our
I'm
Facebook?
copying it right now. I'm putting it on Facebook.
Oh, you are?
Mhm.
Oh, and then I'll just share it from there. Go like Legit with Kevin Witt.
I can't. I don't have the internet hooked up.
Oh,
Don't worry about it.
what is the password for the internet?
Fishbowl one.
Fishbowl one lowercase.
You can go to my page.
To your name? You didn't put it on Legit Kevin Witt? I mean Legit Radio?
So far I just shared on there. But we're live, right?
Yes.
Why can't I see us?
You have to pull it out.
there's John.
Okay. We have music on? Is music going?
I don't need music to be going on YouTube. Because it'll kick us off.
So they're just watching us talk?
Yep. Hi, everybody.
But there's music going on there?
Yes.
There's a delay in the video, I guess.
So this is going to be weird.
Did you share it on Legit?
Yeah. No, I did not.
I'll share it on Legit.
Okay, cool. Okay. All right, we are live with Legit Radio. We are here tonight. We have your weekly guest
Mandy.
and our other guest, Jonathan Rayburn. He is out tonight sick. He's got the flu.
Oh, you were talking about me for a minute there.
No.
Since I have-
You are here in the studio. And in the studio, we have got John Pastel. He's with us tonight. He's discussing he's really empowering the Black community. And what? Who is that? I'm just kidding. And discussing the polarization of politics and Black conservatism. I'm not sure if that's a word, but yeah, I just made it a word. How about that? So, thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for everybody that is going to be tuning in and watching. This is our first time going live on YouTube, so yay. If you want to call in, you have a question, the number is 214-556-6239. And we are going to be talking about all that. So make sure that you subscribe to our channel. We have only one subscriber right now, and we would like a little bit more. So make sure that you subscribe.
I think I'm the subscriber.
Yeah, you probably are. So click the subscribe button, like, and share this video. That would really help us a lot. We really are trying to get the word out to America. So make sure you like and share this video. Yay. We will be right back. And yeah, we're going to be right back. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
So, yes.
Do you have to drag it over?
I already tried.
Do you have to hit play?
Hey, this is Kevin.
Jonathan.
And Mandy.
Catch our show Legit with Kevin Witt every Friday 9 to 11 p.m. Central Standard Time.
On our show, we'll discuss controversial topics and how to live with conviction in a postmodern society.
Iron sharpens iron, but many, in the name of love, neglect the discussion of controversial topics.
We believe this can lead to a narrow, unloving view as many reject what they don't understand. It's time to talk.
We don't believe in foolish debates, but rather an open, honest conversation on less discussed topics in order to tear down the walls that have divided us and have opened a door for hatred.
Tune in every Friday from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. on Legit with Kevin Witt at Fishbowl Radio Network.
Legit Radio. We are here with Mandy and John Pastel. We are going to be discussing how to empower the Black community and also the polarization of politics. Yay. But first off, oh my God, I just think this is so funny. It's not funny. It's really sad. But this is obviously a fake news source. The news grew. It says Lucifer is God declared by Pope Francis.
Oh my gosh. I can't stand
And then
God.
I saw that people are making YouTube videos about Pope Francis thinking that Lucifer is God. Now, I don't know. There's a possibility that this could be true, but the news source is obviously fake.
Yeah, it is. And I cannot stand those because, like, they draw you in and you think, oh my gosh, I can't believe that. And then you Google the source and you're like, oh, I get it.
I know. But, you know, it is funny. I mean, it's something to talk about, you know.
I guess.
What do you
Perhaps.
What do you think? I mean, look, I don't put anything past that Pope. Like, he's declared a lot of
Oh,
things.
Francis, though?
I don't know who the Pope is currently, but
I think it's Pope Francis. I think.
yeah.
Is it?
I think so.
And he's the one that's like making like
oh, yeah, he is making all
everything's
kinds of weird things.
weird.
Mhm.
Like, so I can believe that.
Yeah, that's
It's
true.
not hard to believe.
He has said all kinds of crazy stuff.
He
Yeah.
said some good things though too.
He has, like,
He
what?
certainly has talked a lot about his heart for the Holy Spirit. I think that's pretty awesome.
Well, is it the Holy Spirit or the demonic spirit?
I think it's the Holy Spirit.
Okay. Well, hey, at least we have somebody that's the benefit of the doubt, giving that man the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah. I think he's said some other good things. Maybe
Yeah.
maybe I might look at my sources here.
Yeah,
So,
you might wanna
John,
check that out.
So we do not have a bio on you. So how about you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'll give you the maybe the political analyst, commentator version of who I am. I
Okay.
guess, because there's a lot about me. You know, I got into really thinking a lot about politics probably during Obama's first run, and I got super passionate because I mean, it's the first black president, you know. He had the opportunity to become the first black president, and obviously we know he did. And so as an African American, I tuned in and sorry folks, I'm a first timer here, so I don't know, I need to, you know, put my lips on the microphone just
You have
about.
to just kiss the
I almost
microphone.
have to kiss it. Anyways, the thing about it is this is I got really passionate about this man, Barack Obama. One, he was probably one of the most inspiring, prolific speakers that I had ever heard at the time. And seeing that he was obviously African American, as an African American myself, you felt some sense of motivation to believe in something greater that could happen in this nation. And I think he gave African Americans a sense of optimism, and so I got really passionate. Not to go too much and deep into that, but I got really just glued to my television. At the time, I was a CNN watcher. You know.
Wow.
Wow. I know. I don't. You know.
How
I
the
don't
times
know.
change.
Times have changed. I'm more of a Fox News guy, but that's not to say I don't enjoy watching some CNN. I don't necessarily agree that all of CNN is fake news, but anyways, that's neither here or there at the moment. But I really got passionate about politics when I was confronted about what I believed.
And who confronted you?
A good friend of mine, Michael. Many people might know who he is. I know you know who he is, Kevin.
McNeil,
Michael
or-
Malden.
Oh, well,
No.
Who ran for Senate in Houston. I believe.
I love Michael.
Way back, I forget when that was he ran. But anyways, he started challenging me on what I believed and what I stood for. And really, when I say challenge, he just asked questions. And I didn't fully know, and I really thought I was more.
So at this
Democratic
time,
leaning.
you were a Democrat or you considered
No,
yourself.
I would say
You were
that-
a Obama supporter.
yes, but I didn't vote for Obama.
Wow.
I didn't vote. My first time voting was actually in 2016 for President Donald Trump. I very proudly voted for him for my reasons, which I'm sure we'll get into. But I got passionate in 2014 in the midterms, even more so. You know, I was at church and we had a political, someone who was running, I think for Senate, come at the time and speak to the congregation. And I got really passionate about what she was saying.
Who was that?
I don't even.
You know, I don't.
couldn't tell you.
I must have missed church that day.
I don't know if we had known you then, or if you had known about
In 14?
That maybe you did you?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, well, I got really excited and charged about some of the things that, you know, I'll say this. I think one of the biggest issues that got me super passionate about politics was the pro-life movement. I think single-handedly, the pro-life movement is what got me really passionate.
And we can definitely get into that
about
because,
politics.
yes, I have some things to say about that. But, so, what is your passion and what got you your heart stirring for not only politics but for the Black community? Because where were you raised at?
I was raised in Indiana. I was
Okay.
born in South Florida, in Miami. You know, I was born in a little place that was known as, well, I was born there, but we lived in a place called the Triangle in Miami. And it was right near around Liberty City. If those of you who know Miami-Dade County, Liberty City is a drug-infested type of neighborhood, very low income area, lots of poverty. And the Triangle, they called it that because I guess there was it was, you know, the shape of where the drug drops were created, sort of like a triangle.
So you were born there and then you left and you went to Indiana.
Yes.
Your family and
I
everything.
was young, you know, 4 or 5, and moved to northwest Indiana, about 30 minutes outside of Chicago.
So what was your life like growing up? What was your life in, meaning, did you grow up in, were you a privileged Black man or were you a not so privileged black man?
I would say I was, you know, you know, I have a lot to say about privilege and even the myth of what I believe we have created in our culture of white privilege. I certainly believe that's a myth. I don't agree with white privilege, nor on the terminology. However, I believe that I did grow up pretty privileged, actually.
So affluent, you would say?
No, not affluent. Certainly not affluent. I grew up very poor in some situations, living in the projects, eating government cheese, you know. Certainly.
That cheese is so good, though. I mean,
I don't really remember it that well.
I
so,
do.
I don't know if I enjoyed it as much as you probably did. You know, I do remember it a little bit because it came in the block.
Yes.
Is what I remember.
That big old block cheese.
big
It
old
was.
block, yes,
you could
I
make
remember
everything
that.
with that.
You could.
Quesadillas and put the cheese on your eggs in the morning and cheese toast and.
Yes.
You could get creative with
Bologna
it.
sandwich.
Oh yeah. Oh, fried bologna with
I
some
love
cheese on it.
fried
It is
bologna.
so
Bologna,
good.
I don't know if we fried it.
Lord
all the time, but
Jesus. Oh, y'all did it. Y'all are
Down
black.
here
Y'all
in
fried
Texas,
it.
we did.
bologna sandwiches, yes.
Mhm.
But I grew up in the projects, you know, part of my life, probably at the very beginning, you know, government assistance, government housing. We were on welfare. My mom, you know, my father also at one. We received food stamps.
Okay, so I ask you this because you are a black man. Because many people would say, well, he's black and he's a Trump supporter because he never faced discrimination like some of us have. Is
No.
what they would assume.
You know, I don't know
and
what
call
I am.
you an Uncle Tom and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't agree with that either.
Well,
because
I don't either, but you know, this is the things that the liberal people would say
Well,
about you.
I think it's this. Politics have become so polarizing right now, and what has happened is that everybody goes into a category if you don't agree with them, and I don't like that. Let me address this though. As far as not having dealt with racism, that certainly is not true. I have walked out, as a 14, 15-year-old young kid down my street, and have been called the N-word. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that word on the air, but I won't. But I have been called that, hey, in a group of us and friends, just, a couple years ago, I was called that here in Dallas, in the Oak Lawn neighborhood. I was at church for all things, coming out of church, and somebody just screamed that at me, the N-word. So,
it wasn't a church member.
No.
I'm like, hold on.
Yeah, no. But
do I need to go rebuke somebody?
I have dealt with racism firsthand, and this is the issue that I have, with those on the right, and as someone who considers themselves a conservative, is the indifference that I believe right now that we have, the polarizing indifference. And when I say indifference, I'm simply saying that I believe that a lot of those on the right can be very dispassionate about the realities that people really face. And whether it's, I get it, you don't have to stay there, because I think that we've gotten so deep into a victim mentality and a victim mindset. Oh, and look what happened to our ancestors, and look where we've come from. Oh, and look at this, they're killing us all in the streets because of the color of our skin, which I don't buy that fully. Or I can't do this because there aren't opportunities for me because I'm black. Well, I don't agree with that. Those notions are just not true. And Martin Luther King Jr. in 1967 talked about this in his speech at Stanford University called "The Other America," and he talked about these contrasting views of an inferior and superior race. And what he was saying, though, he was saying that it's a myth, because he would go on to say in this speech that there's this myth that exists amongst our culture that there's seemingly a superior race who controls all of the power, and they have the money and this or that. And what he was talking about was our as an African American, our white counterparts, and he was sort of debunking that myth to black Americans in that time, saying that doesn't exist. That's not real. There is no inferior and superior race. And if you listen to Martin Luther King in many of his much of his speeches, he would always talk about how we are all of God's children. And I think that was something about Dr. King that he did so well. He was very inclusive in the sense when he talked about relationship with God and us all being children of God. In many of his speeches, he would say things like, he would quote the preamble of the Constitution, that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, which I think that is probably one of the most profound statements in our Constitution or in any type of document that represents our government, that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that we are all created equal. And so I think that having even experienced racism, I've always tried to not look at myself as a black man. I'm a child of God first and foremost.
Right.
That's
Amen.
where my identity lies.
And talking about white privilege, I will just say, as a white person, I don't believe in white privilege either, because we cannot assume that everyone is privileged just because they are a certain skin color. And many, especially black people, get upset with me because I say stuff like that. But here's the deal. I was not raised in an all-white community. I was not raised in an all-white city. I was raised in Brownsville, Texas, on the border of Mexico. Down there, my high school, for example, had 5,000 students. there were 2 kids that were part black and part Hispanic, Latino, and there were maybe 10 white people. The rest were Mexican. So in my time of growing up as a child, I never did. It was in living in Brownsville, South Texas. If you were not Mexican, or if you did not speak some type of Spanish, you could not function in society. And the Mexican people were in charge. They had the jobs, and they were my parents' bosses, and they would give them the not so great jobs because they were white. And so the white people there were not at all privileged. We were actually the opposite. We were very discriminated against. I would say the only privilege I had was the Hispanic people would always be like, oh, you have beautiful eyes. And they would always want to touch my eyes. But that was my only privilege. And so growing up down there, like I grew up really, I identified with the Hispanic culture, and I really acclimated to the Hispanic ways. And so I grew up eating all Mexican. That's why I love going, like, Mexican food is like, that is what I'm used to eating. The tacos we had tonight and cardo and all that stuff. I grew up eating that. We did not have ice cream trucks. We had elote trucks driving through our neighborhoods.
So in my neighborhood also.
So like, you know, like.
I grew up in a mainly Hispanic.
I'm like, I don't understand this. I was not really even aware of the racism that was taking place until I moved to Dallas, and I moved here in 2000, because I had been not raised that way. I was raised not to really see color, and and people date. Oh, well, who do you prefer to date? I don't care about like anybody that I love. Like, I don't care about what color skin you are. Like, that's dumb. But I am, as a white person, I do feel like what has happened since I felt like that we had come a long way as far as racism was concerned. And I do feel that Obama initiated this divide, but this racial divide that's happening in America. And the way he initiated it was, it started with the police shootings, but he really got people like, stand up for your rights and all that stuff, which is great. But then, and whenever they had the Black Lives Matter march in Dallas, I was down there marching with them the first time. But then they, on national TV, said, we don't want white people to come. So I'm like, okay. And so then they made it all about, you gotta be black and all this stuff. And then it trickled over into the church even. And so then they were like white shaming people. And that's what I have a problem with nowadays, is the white shaming that happens within the church and everywhere. Even as a comedian in the comedy community in Dallas, like it is okay for black people to get up and make all kind of horrible jokes about white people, but a white person cannot get up, and if they even say the word black, everybody's like quiet and like, oh, is somebody gonna get offended? And I'm like,
What's about to come out of their mouth?
Right.
Why is it that way? Like, it's not. What's good for the goose is good for the gander.
Well,
I'm so southern.
Let me say this, Kevin. I think when you think about the term white privilege, though I do not agree with the terminology, I do understand the perspective and where it is coming from. I don't know if this mic is working.
It definitely is.
Okay. This is the thing. I do understand where the thought process or where the terminology kind of come from when you think about perspective. I think, if I may, unfortunately, but I think that it's easy for a white person to say, I don't understand white privilege. I don't understand what that means. I don't understand why we are, promoting this terminology. But this is where it comes from. We're talking about statistically. Now, let me say again, I don't agree with the terminology. However, when people are saying white privilege, they are referring to statistically an advancement. What African Americans have lacked historically, obviously stemming all the way back to slavery. So are we in slavery now? No, we're not. However, it has taken decades upon decades for African Americans to advance. Now, I believe what we should call the terminology, it should be more about growth and empowerment versus looking at white counterparts and labeling white people as privileged. Because if you ask me, we're all privileged to be living and to be breathing and to be created. I believe we're all privileged. I'm going to answer this question, or I'm going to talk about it this way too.
There
Oh,
you
there
go.
I am.
There you go.
I was talking on the side there, and my mic must be right here. Anyways, I had an experience with a student when I was a youth pastor, and it was a white student who grew up in a very affluent community, an affluent family. They didn't want for anything. And we started talking about the shootings, when the shootings were happening. We had the Michael Browns and the Trayvon Martins and recently Philando Castile. Well, I guess that was a year ago, whatnot. All of these shootings. And his mom asked him in my presence, well, what do you think? Now, he goes to he went to a Christian academy, but a predominantly white school, affluent, it's private. And he said most of him and his friends, their conversation is, why do they keep blaming white people for everything? And now this kid is not a super passionate, outspoken kid. And this was the first time I had ever seen him get this passionate and outspoken about anything. And he goes, it's not our fault. It's like, if you live in the ghetto, you don't have to stay there. Nobody's making you stay there. If you're on welfare, nobody's making you be on welfare. Nobody's making you not have this or have that. Now, I think a lot of that came out of passion, and some of it was out of ignorance as well, of not knowing what has happened for generations that has put African Americans as far as statistically where they are. We've got to understand and separate, because I think this is the issue that I have with Republicans that are indifferent and discompassionate, is that they don't connect the dots and go, there is a disadvantage, whether you understand it or not. There is. If you speak biblically and you begin to understand that David set up Solomon to build the temple through inheritance, but David set him up. Well, you have African Americans that are living with no setup, no father in the home, no example, and we can get into that a whole nother time. But what we started talking about when he started saying that, and I said, well, I kind of understand how you feel. He said, why are they blaming white people? And I said, man, I totally get, because he's 17 years old. He didn't do anything wrong. He was born white. Mm-hmm. Why is he suddenly labeled? This is when I became very passionate and moved by what we were doing to our culture. Because not only are we saying, well, you're an oppressor out of the womb, you're an oppressor because you're white, but we're telling these black kids over here, you're going to have it hard. Mm-hmm. It's going to be tough for you. You're going to have to get used to, things not going your way because you're black. So we're preaching inferiority to them, mm-hmm. and we're preaching that you're an oppressor, instead of going, no. You actually have the power to deliver and bring freedom, and you actually are greater. You can do anything that you want to. Like, I heard, I was watching literally, I mean, it blew my mind. I was watching, I'm gonna name the show. I was watching Madam Secretary.
I don't even know what that is.
Great show. Love the show. Tia Leone stars in it.
I think I've seen commercials for it.
I want to say that's her name. Anyways, great actress. She plays Secretary of the United States in the show, one of the episodes, anyways, her chief of media or something like that brought in a bunch of black and brown kids, underprivileged from low income neighborhoods, and her speech to them was, things are going to be tough for you, you know, because of where you've come from and this or that and da 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 da. Essentially what she was saying is, because you're black and you're brown, you're going to have it tough and hard. Well, why are we implanting thoughts like that into young African American kids? And then why are we implanting thoughts? Because if I'm white and I'm a kid and you're telling me just because I'm white, something's my fault and something's wrong, then if I'm white, I'm pissed off now.
Right.
And all we're doing is reproducing hatred in our culture. White privilege, that terminology only reproduces hatred.
Yeah, it does.
And telling African American kids or black and brown kids that they are going to have it tough and they're going to have it hard and the world's not going to like them and this and that is only producing a sense of inferiority, disenfranchisement. It is only telling them that they're going to need to depend on the government. They're going to need to depend on the political party. They're going to need to depend on politicians the rest of their life, which is why we have gotten this sense of victimhood and victim mentality that is running rampant in the African American community right now.
Yeah, and you know what? And the whole white shaming people, because that's what has happened with the whole white privilege thing. The white shaming people is what it's done is it started pissing off white people. And so the black people are over here creating Black Lives Matter, and the KKK is over here getting their feathers ruffled and getting started up again. And so what is this going to do? This is going to cause a civil war. And so it's just,
I beg to differ on that.
That is going to cause a civil war.
We need a voice of reason.
We are having a civil war right now. It's just on social media.
That's because we have pundits. If the pundits would stop echoing, and this is something I started getting to this is why you've asked me why did I stop posting videos?
Yeah.
Because I started realizing I was becoming a pundit. I was becoming an echo of the political swirl that was going on. And I can get into even some more about that I feel like God actually revealed to me and showed me about some of this, discerning the signs of the times. And these are one of the signs of the times that we would all be, one would rise up against, another. I stopped because I started listening and hearing myself and going, I love Candace Owens. I think she's doing incredible things.
I love her too.
I love guys like Ben Shapiro, Charlie, Kirk. I love these young conservatives who are stepping up and fighting for religious freedom and fighting for liberties for conservatives and the Second Amendment. I love a lot of this, but we all...
Do you love Silk and Diamond?
I love Silk and Diamond. But we all cannot... I said to somebody recently, I said, I gotta be John. I can't aspire to sound like Candace Owens. Because at the end of the day, let me just be honest, that is one thing the liberal media has done really well is clone themselves. There's no difference. And guess what's happening? People are starting to wake up to that and realize and going, wait a minute, why are they all saying the same thing? I think that's what we're starting to see right now.
And that's why we have the Walk Away campaign.
I agree.
That's why we have the Blexit.
I agree.
You know what the Blexit is?
Yes.
You better know. And so you're a black man. Hello, you better know. But we got all those
there
people.
There are plenty of black people that don't know what Blexit is.
Why don't you explain it?
Then we have Anomaly, who used to be a very liberal person, and now he wouldn't say he's not a Republican or Democrat. He's a Trump supporter, but he did not vote for Trump, and now he's just like, oh my God, this is what's happening.
And for the record, I'm neither liberal or conservative. Well, I'm conservative. I'm neither Democrat or Republican. Let me say that.
I'm
the
Republican.
viewers.
I am a Republican. I lean libertarian, but I'm a Republican. I mean, I'm registered Republican, and I've been Republican for even back in the day.
Really?
I voted for McCain.
Oh wow.
So, but because I don't really, I'm more worried about our economics in America than, well, at the time I was not really worried about the social issues. Now I am worried about some of the social issues, but, I just think that, you know, what's happening is there is, I hope not. We are going toward a civil war. And the thing is, how I got involved in politics was whenever I was at a certain church, and Peter Lewis was up there, and he
Gave it away.
you know, Peter Lewis goes to many churches.
Very
so
true.
he was up there, and this was years ago, and he was talking about the communist agenda. And that was how we talked about it on the
Yeah,
show
right.
before.
Mhm.
That was how I even knew about it. And he was talking about the communist agenda and what the Communist Party in America is trying to do. And I just started really looking at that. And I'm like, oh my God, like it is happening all around us. But people in America are so blinded to this because they don't even care really to pay attention to it. But it's really happening. And it's like, it's so sad. Like, just like the things that's happening with homosexuality, normalizing homosexuality, breaking up the family unit, you know, all this stuff, destroying all that, because they want to destroy all that so that we are left with nothing and we have nothing but to depend on but the communist agenda. And so whenever they present it to us, we're going to all be like, oh, yes. And they're already starting with this socialism crap. Like, they have already started. And then and for me, I'm like, I don't understand how any Christian could vote Democratic or even proclaim to be a Democrat. I don't get it. I do not get it. Because the Democratic Party stands for many things that God does not stand for. Like abortion, just for example. And so how can you in good conscience go and vote for Hillary Clinton?
I do. I know the answer to that.
And then go in church and praise the Lord while you're praising the Lord and also supporting abortion, which is murder. Like, I don't get it. But if you know the answer to it, please enlighten me, because
Yes.
I sure don't know.
I think this is one of the reasons why you see those in the body of Christ who can be very proud about being liberal and Democrat, because what they begin to promote, obviously, I'm not saying that it's the right viewpoint. I am neither on this show at this time, at this moment, going to say whether I'm not here to talk about right and wrong, really, right now. But since I am here to talk about the empowering African Americans, I'm going to address that question in the context of the African American church. The black church is predominantly liberal and Democrat. Why is this? Why can any Christian be liberal or Democrat with things like supporting same-sex marriage, supporting abortion? Liberals are going far and beyond to take away religious liberty and freedoms. The reason is because liberals, I think, have done a great job at appealing to the soul of man. And when I say appealing to the soul of man, a lot of it is emotionalism, and a lot of what I think a lot of African Americans and African American church, the reason why many of them are liberal and Democrat, is because I believe that liberals appeal to this sense of helping those that are disenfranchised. And so I don't know how that supersedes in their mind or in their perspective. How does that supersede abortion, or how does that supersede, religious liberty, saying the name of Jesus in school, or how does that supersede, I forget the other one I mentioned, but at the end of the day, I believe that they appeal to that emotional connection with humanity. And because of that, I think many Christians, I'm very careful to use this word, but can seemingly be spoon-fed.
This is called legit radio, where we keep it legit and real.
Are seemingly, many Christians are seemingly bamboozled into believing that this is the party of the people, because they're for the people, because they're for the downtrodden, they're for the neglected, the rejected, the abused, the abandoned, and they categorize. I mean, at the end of the day, we start getting into identity politics, and they start to categorize and pick apart. And suddenly, if you're a Christian and you're overly emotional about our culture and society, then I think that you're going to look at that and go, man, this is what Jesus would do. Like, Jesus would go and help the poor and give subsidies. Jesus would, lower the taxes for the poor. Jesus, he would accept gay people, all people. You start rationalizing. Man, I think this is what Jesus is about. I mean, I'm sitting here right now and it sounds really good, man. Jesus accepts all of us. God wants us all. We're all his children. And so it becomes this gospel of inclusion, which actually exists by there's a famous Church of God in Christ preacher. Carlton Pearson was a famous televangelist.
Right. Mm-hmm. I thought he became a universalist.
And he has this thing called the gospel of inclusion. And it all sounds nice and well, because I think any Christian could agree and go, yeah, of course the Lord will love. But, and we forget the end, the but end. I love, because John the Baptist said this to the Pharisees. He said, "Who warned you to flee the wrath and indignation that is to come, you brood of vipers?" He said, "Let your lives prove your change of heart." And he said, "Bring forth fruit consistent with repentance." And I believe this is Matthew 3. And unfortunately, that part gets left out. Repentance. And so suddenly what you have is you have an entire group. Now, I don't believe that Jesus is either liberal, conservative, Democrat, or Republican.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
I don't believe he has a political party. He has a kingdom. At the same time, I believe there are a lot of bad things within the Republican Party that we overlook the same way. One of them is indifference, discompassion, the inability to relate to those that have downtrodden and the broken and the destitute and the disenfranchised. The inability to relate, and the whole slogan of, well, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, which Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, it's cruel to tell a man to pull himself up by his own bootstraps if he does not even have boots. That was quoted by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and I think that he was absolutely right. So I don't agree with that sense either, and I think right now it's the us versus them. Everything is polarized in politics, and this is to sort of challenge what you were saying when it comes to the Civil War thing, that we're in the middle of probably a civil war, where it's uprising right now in our nation because of the polarizing us versus them type of mentality. I believe the tide could change when the voice of truth arises, and wisdom and begins to speak with clarity and begins to speak not as a political pundit, not as one who is rah go Trump and go conservatism, or rah liberalism and go, you know, Hillary or whoever, but they simply begin to sort of draw this line in the sand, and they're not so much talking about what they're against, but they're talking about more about what they're for and what they're standing on and their values. And I believe the voice of wisdom and the voice of reason and truth has a spirit of understanding, which is one of the 7 spirits of God, which I think is one of the greatest spirits that we need right now, is a spirit of understanding. Because I need to be able to say, as a conservative, as a Christian man who has conservative views, I need to be able to say to them, you know what? I understand that you think this way or you believe this way. I get how you could come to that conclusion. I don't have to agree with it, because I think what we have done is we think that having understanding means that it's agreement. Having understanding of how one could come within our culture, we should all be able to understand, especially within the culture we live in. Within our culture, I think there should be a lot of understanding of why there are umpteen thousand genders suddenly. Well, we should be able to understand how one could draw that conclusion, because quite frankly, it's just being labeled, but a lot of this stuff has been around for centuries. The reality of it is this: I don't agree with it. I denounce it. I emphatically reject it. However, my spirit of understanding, when I say a spirit of understanding, it's going beyond points of views. I believe it's tapping into the heart and mind of a person and going, I understand. Why do I understand? Well, I understand because I understand the world we live in. It is fallen. It is corrupt. I understand that a wicked and adulterous generation seeketh after a sign. Because, see, Jesus said in Matthew 16, now I feel like I'm going to preach and I don't want to.
Do it.
But he said in Matthew 16, you look up in the sky and say that it is red, and you say, you know, the weather is going to be fair. And you wake in the morning and you say the sky is red and the weather is going to be fair. And he says, you know, I'm paraphrasing, but he says, how can you look up in the sky and discern the weather, but yet you cannot discern the signs of the times? If we have a spirit of understanding, now this is where the body of Christ comes in. If we begin to have a spirit of understanding, what we'll begin to see is what's going on around us, and we won't be so shocked. Oh my goodness, they're doing this. Oh, they just passed same-sex marriage. Oh, well, we've got to become wise and understand the signs of these are the signs of the times. We got to understand how to discern. And then Jesus goes on to talk about the leaven of the Sadducees and Pharisees. He was talking about their doctrine. He says, beware of the leaven of the Sadducees and Pharisees. He's talking about their doctrine. What is their doctrine? Many of these men were political. At that time, they were political. And the Sadducees and Pharisees, some of them became believers in Jesus, and they were political, and they actually start inserting their political agenda of the law into the believers and around the believers of that time. And what began to happen is that many believers started going, oh, they're saying we have to observe the law. And then that's when Paul and Apollos came and rebuked them and said, no, we are all have been saved by faith, grace through faith, or faith through grace, or by faith through grace. And so he debunked that. If we, the church, begin to understand the signs of the times and the politicals, we won't get wrapped up in the political swirl, because I believe we are a lot. I'm guilty of it myself. We will actually have a voice of wisdom to begin to speak to the political matters, and to begin to speak to even those that are getting wrapped up. Because the thing is that the whole gender thing, all of this stuff is manufactured. It's all being created. you know. And if we're not careful, we will think that it's people. But our war is not against flesh and blood. And then go.
Yeah. Well, whenever you go to the doctor nowadays, it's, you know, it used to just say male or female, and now it says male, female. Like, first of all, it lists your sexual orientation, and then what you identify as gender-wise, and then what you were born as. So it's like,
Serious?
yeah. And so it's like, because we live in a PC culture.
Yeah. I haven't been to the doctor in a while, so I was not aware.
Well, just wait till you go.
And if we're not careful, we're going, oh, the liberals did this. When in reality, it's the signs of the times. That's what I'm saying.
But it is a signs of the times.
see what you're
But
It ain't the liberals.
I would say that it is the liberals operating in a spirit,
Maybe.
and that spirit is not of the Lord. But on that, we are going to go to break. We have to take a commercial break, and we will be right back to dive back into this discussion. It radio.
I think we should get into this. What we were talking about while we were
Yeah.
while we were on break here.
So we were talking about. I'm like, we were talking about. So, do I think people should vote? Because Mandy was saying, and I think John was saying as well, that they don't believe in voting as Christians. They don't believe in voting
On the
Voting
basis of economics.
on basis
Yeah.
of economics.
Yeah.
And I said I do, and I don't really care about the social issues. But if you can't vote on economics and then you don't really believe in voting on the social issues, then why even vote? Like, why do you care who's the president? So for me, I said I've always voted Republican, always, since before I was a Christian, because of the economic. I would rather, I want to have food on my table before I care who's marrying who. I don't care about that. Now, I'm a Christian now, and I
posed the question.
And so he was asking me.
I'm posing the question.
I'm not posing the question. No, pose the question.
I'm going to pose the question of what I asked.
Yes.
And so what I asked Kevin was, okay, everybody's Democrat. You know, assume that the Republican Party doesn't exist. Conservatism, you know, essentially, or conservatism exists, but the Republican Party doesn't exist. So if you have a Democrat, a conservative Democrat who is pro-life, but they are yet for higher taxes, versus a Democrat who is more liberal and they are pro-choice, yet for lower taxes, I asked Kevin, who would you vote for? And you said,
I would vote for now being
today.
a Christian. I would vote for the pro-life because that is because I do care. That's the one social issue that I really do care about. And it's
I doubt
abortion.
it, but I bet there's more.
No, because when
I
it
just
comes
have to give other examples.
when it comes to homosexual marriage, I don't believe in homosexual same-sex marriage. I don't think it should be labeled a marriage. I do believe that there should be a same-sex civil union, because I, coming from the gay community, knew throughout my life many people who were in monogamous same-sex relationships, but when goes to the hospital, sometimes they could not go visit them because they were not family, what have you. They could not make any choices for their loved one because they were not family. They could not buy a house together. If one died, they had no rights to anything because they were not married. So the family would come in, and whenever their loved one died, they would just take everything. And because they hated the fact that their child was gay, they would say, okay, you get nothing. We don't even know you. So-and-so's dead over here. So we don't know you. We're taking everything, the house and everything. So because of those, where I may not agree with that, with the lifestyle or those choices, as a human being, they are entitled to certain things, and they are entitled as humans to love whoever they love and to also be treated as a human and not like an animal. So I do agree with, I wish it wasn't called a marriage. I wish it was called a civil union. The only thing I have a problem with is because a marriage is a religious ceremony that takes place, and God, whenever he in the Bible, you know, he describes
biblically instituted.
Yeah, he describes a marriage between a man and a woman, not two men, or vice versa, two women. So that is the reason why I don't like it being called a marriage. But if two people that are gay want to go down to the courthouse and get married and have a ceremony, if they want to have a,
you mean have a civil union?
Yeah, and
right.
have a civil union, and then have a whatever kind of celebration in their gay church that they go to, that's fine with me, because that don't affect my life any. But when it comes to killing babies, I'm not okay with that. So, and a lot of women are like, oh, well, I think, and a lot of Christian women too, I don't think that anybody should should tell a woman how to handle her body or whatever. But if we are Christians and we are living according to biblical morals, the 10 Commandments say, thou shalt not kill. Well, when you kill a baby, that's what you're doing. So
I think it's much more than that, but yes.
Well, that's just
essentially though.
I'm keeping it surface level basic.
Yes, but
I mean,
the whole point was, so there are some social issues that supersede economics or voting on the basis of economics.
Yeah.
So, and I would beg to differ that there are probably more, because we have not talked about things like, I mean, there have been people that have come forth about legalizing polygamy,
I mean, well,
so
and
many different
when we
things.
get into like sexual perversion,
Okay,
like
let's not talk about sexual then.
legalizing polygamy and legalizing pedophilia and all that, no, absolutely not. I draw a line somewhere.
Well, see, the thing about it though is
Well, that's a good
the
thing.
homosexual agenda is so much more than just a man marrying a man and a woman marrying a woman. The homosexual agenda now is gender identity. The homosexual agenda now is bathrooms where people going, I have 2 young daughters. So I'm sorry, but yes, that is going to be important. That's an important issue.
Well,
to me.
here's the deal with the bathroom issue. We're going to take 2 seconds to talk about this, because me being someone who used to live my life as a woman, I will tell you, when I went to a restroom, first of all, I never cared whether it was against the law or not. I always went to the female restroom. Now, and I never had an issue, really. Twice I had issues. And that was because females were jealous. But I had issues twice. And so then, but typically I had no issues. And if someone is truly a transgendered person, the way that they present themselves in public is going to be that of a woman. And so you are probably not going to know that they are truly a man. So I don't think,
but we
I don't
know
think it
that
should-
that's not what the law was.
I know, but that law was stupid, because like we should have just left it alone. There has been training since the beginning of time, and they've been going to the bathroom since forever.
Oh my God.
And nobody had an issue. But all of a sudden now, it's a big old issue, but these men who are saying that they identify as a woman and they look like Billy Joe Bob, who put his wig on like a baseball cap, you're not a transgendered person. So no, you have no right to go to a female's restroom. I'm sorry. Period. But yeah, so, and coming from my past and my life that I lived for.
The education system. Let's not talk about something sexual, but pushing the agenda in the educational system, or even in the military. Okay, that's one issue. Obviously, we continue on the homosexual agenda. However, what about issues like prescription drugs, incarceration?
I very much think that something needs to happen with the health
things
care.
that affect culture. It doesn't have to be a sexual thing,
Right, the prison
but
system.
things that affect culture. You mean to tell me that economically, that economics mean more than those social issues? Because that's what you're saying.
To certain people.
But that's what you're saying.
I'm saying
But I'm saying,
that it shouldn't be that way with a Christian.
yeah, and that
Because money, what is it? The love of money is
That's-
the root
yeah.
of all evil. So I don't think that money should be that big on the priority list when it comes to a Christian's views in politics.
But unfortunately, if we did not care about money at all, we would probably all be standing in a welfare line.
I just don't think we should vote.
I'm not
according
talking about
to
not caring
that
for money.
That particular issue shouldn't be your point in how you vote.
What I'm saying is I believe that there are significant social issues that supersede
Right.
economic issues.
For you and for you. But everybody, we cannot generalize. Everybody has different reasons.
Now, I'm
that
not
they
saying
vote.
all of them supersede. Now, I'm not saying the issue with the prison, like prison incarceration and stuff. I'm not saying that supersedes, but I am saying that I'm gonna weigh that heavily when I'm considering a candidate, something like that. I'm gonna weigh what their stance is on crime. I'm gonna weigh what their stance is. Yes.
You see that hand? Okay. So my question is, well, I don't know. Sorry, I completely forgot. I lost my train.
No apologies. No apologies needed.
What was your question?
I don't remember.
Was it about incarceration?
I'm trying to think, but
We were
it
talking
totally
about
slipped my mind.
incarceration.
Which we need to talk about that, because that is part of my desire for empowering the African American community is.
But first, we're going to
this
talk
issue with
about.
incarceration.
We will be talking about first. So we got. Yeah, I've got a lot of things I want to talk about. We've only got like not that much time. So, but I want to talk about. Okay, a lot of the African American community are pro-choice, but if they research further, Margaret Sanger started Planned Parenthood. Margaret Sanger started Planned Parenthood in the like pretty low income neighborhoods, which where a lot of minorities lived in those neighborhoods. And that was her way of eradicating the minorities. So now they present it like, oh, we love you and we care about you. But that was all a false narrative. They presented it that way, but they were really not that way. And so then recently, I saw a billboard going down the tollway in Dallas. They took it down, but it said it had 3 black women.
Yeah, I know which one you're talking about.
And and I forgot what it said.
This is loving our family or something like
and
this.
I was like,
by
why
choosing.
are the liberals and Democrats not out protesting and marching? Because that billboard just, I mean, it was racism is just as plain as day. I didn't see people going down there marching in the streets and beating cars up and beating in windows of businesses and laying in the street and all that. I didn't see all that. Well, they should have been, as far as I was concerned, because that was promoting racism. And they had tried to say, oh, well, that is how Planned Parenthood was back then, but it's changed. It's not like that. No, it's still that way.
I think the philosophy or I don't know if I would say the philosophy, the way of thinking, I guess. I don't know. Yes, I think it's still certainly there. And here's my thing about that. I think we got to go deeper than a person when you talk about, because the situation with African Americans are decreasing at an increasing rate. When you take the population in a whole over decades. I'm not talking about were there more African Americans born last year than died. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about as a ratio, statistically over decades, African Americans are decreasing at an increasing rate, meaning that there are more of us dying off than are living when you look at it from a racial standpoint, at the rate in which our race is growing. And because the abortion issue within the African American community, in my opinion, is so much bigger than one person being Margaret Sanger. And we've heard a lot of conversation, especially in predominantly conservative, Christian, evangelical, charismatic backgrounds that like to mention Margaret Sanger. But I believe that we've got to go, in my opinion, actually back to when Africans were actually first brought to this nation. And when you talk about killing off an entire culture and shackling, or chaining, or enslaving, should I say? Just speak it plain. This is legit, right? Anyways, when you talk about this issue, I think that we have to go all the way back and understand, because I believe if we really understood our value and our greatness, we are the sons and daughters of former slaves, people that have come against great adversity, have risen from the depths of utter despair. And there is greatness inside of the African American culture and African American community. There's such beauty, and my whole desire is to draw that out and go, we're greater than our need for government, our need for a political agenda or political party or a political leader, or we're greater than our need for welfare or assistance or government programs and subsidies. I'm not saying those things aren't important. Those things are needed. People need those things. Those are important, but we're greater than our dependency on it. And I think that that's something that I really want to begin to voice, and I want to see that voice within our communities when it comes to the abortion issue. When we begin to understand our greatness, I believe that we actually begin to see a significant decrease in the abortion rate within the African American community and minority communities at large. Obviously, we know that Planned Parenthood specifically targets, whether they want to admit it or not, they target black and brown neighborhoods, which is why you see most Planned Parenthoods in or around the vicinity of low-income black and brown neighborhoods. It's because they know that poverty, the levels of poverty that exist, of hardship, and all of those things create for the perfect storm for a woman to want to walk into one of those clinics and say, hey, I can't do it. I can't raise this child. I got this going on, whether it's domestic abuse, because we know that that is highly more prevalent per ratio, because I always say ratio because what people fail to, they always want to say, well, like with the whole black and white police shootings. Well, that this statistic is not really true because, well, especially with the welfare. I'm not going to go shooting with the welfare. They'll say, well, there's more white people on welfare. Well, when you talk about, well, there's more white people in America. Of course there are. But when you speak on the ratio standpoint, African Americans are far more enslaved into the welfare system than those of our white counterparts. Anyway, so I talk about ratios for that purpose, because yes, I'm not saying that African Americans have more abortions, than white people, because that's not accurate. But for the ratio of how many there are of us, we have far more. And so I think that we've got to begin to address our greatness and empower African Americans and families and men and women and our children. I believe it starts in childhood, understanding. I myself have had struggles with being inferior or seeing myself as less than as a black person, which, I disassociated myself a lot with black people for that reason, because I was not very proud of what I felt like my race represented, until I started discovering the beauty of my culture and of that we're more than our struggle. We're more than our enslavement. There's such beauty in the African American diaspora, or in African American community, and Africans in general. And I started really being awakened to that when I went to Kenya. So,
but don't you think that we are talking about like racism and stuff like this, but black people are not the only ones that feel that way. Black people are not the only minority group, number one. Hispanic people are not the only minority group. Race as a whole is not the only minority group. Women are a minority group. Homosexuals are a minority group. And so, like me, as a, guy who was homosexual and I came out at 15, I was definitely discriminated against.
How do you classify minorities?
I definitely felt less than. So it's not about race and black as a whole. It's about all minorities feel that way. And so white people can be just as much of a minority as a black person can. an Asian person can be just as much of a minority as a black person can. So I really think
I think that depends on how you define minority. Everybody defines it differently.
I think a minority is anybody who's been discriminated against, period.
Yeah.
And those are, and usually it's the minority classes of people. And I think that the biggest discrimination that people face today in America, at least, is the socioeconomic discrimination. It's not really about a white thing and a black thing. It's about a rich thing and a poor thing.
Well, the reason why it's become the white thing and the black thing, because historically African Americans and whites have historically been the most hostile people groups in our nation. So at the end of the day, when you say, well, why is it about this or that? Well, that's because there has been no more oppressed people group outside of maybe Indians. But I wouldn't even say...
Well, majority of Americans are white or black.
Exactly.
So.
I don't think there's been a more disenfranchised, oppressed people group, historically speaking, than African Americans in this nation. That's a fact.
Yes, but here's the thing.
That's where it comes from.
And what my whole issue with it is that not one person alive today has been a slave owner. Not one person alive today has been a slave. We are all human beings born on a, in my eyes, on
but see, this is the Republican. This is the Republican notion that I'm talking. The indifference.
Well, hey, I said I was a Republican. So.
No, I'm saying this is the indifference. This is the This is the
discussion. But I don't think it's an indifference. I think it's just realistic. No one alive has been a slave owner or a slave.
I agree with that.
So therefore, when you were born and when I was born, we were born into an equal playing field. Now, that's just how it is. And so therefore, it's not like, and I was born into a very poor family. Well, no, I was not born into a poor family. My family became poor. Had to rephrase that. My family became poor due to a divorce, but so I just don't see the big, like, I think that the disconnect that people are seeing is we have a socioeconomic difference in America.
No, it's not just that.
And just like in India, they have a caste system. Well, they have a caste system by law there. We really have a caste system here in America too, but it's just not observed by the law.
It's from a generational standpoint. Go ahead.
Do you remember, and I think I told you about that study. I don't know why. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. It's fine.
Okay. So I told you about that study where they had taken mice. I think, was it you I was talking about with that?
I don't know.
Maybe it was my mother. But anyway, they did this study with these mice where, they did the whole maze thing, and they had this thing that would give them an electric shock if they went down this one path. Well, then they got pregnant and had babies. Well, these babies did the same test, and when they would get close to that path, they would experience PTSD symptoms. They didn't experience it themselves. Their parents did. Yet it was passed through the blood.
Exactly. And that's what
the
I'm
PTSD.
talking about.
No, that is a fact. It is a scientific fact.
And I'm not discrediting
so
that
I can
fact.
see how this generation
I'm
who
not
was
saying it's
not
okay,
born
Kevin.
enslaved can have those same, hurt feelings or whatever.
The emotions come from deep wounds for an entire people group from generations past.
And see, that's a
I think that's
generational curses. That's what the Bible talks about.
That's the indifference that I'm saying many people do not go. Now, that's not an excuse to go, hey, let's live on welfare the rest of our lives. Hey, let's not work. Hey, let's play the victim card and the inferiority mentality kind of. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that we must address the realities that there are deep wounds and deep pains from a generational standpoint that we've got to speak to, as well as be compassionate towards and help people. It's just like anybody who's experienced trauma, or because let me say this, and I want to hear you. Let me say this real quick. I heard T.D. Jakes say this.
Oh God!
When talking with Oprah Winfrey.
Oh God!
I know.
Oh Lord!
You have whatever your thoughts are about T.D. Jakes.
Woo,
based
and
on whatever
Oprah.
You might have heard.
Lord Jesus, I won't.
But I thought
Open my
I thought
ears to
this
hear
was,
this.
I thought this was significant when he said it, and I thought it was dead on. He said African Americans are still learning. When you took a slave in 1863, I believe was the Emancipation Proclamation, and you suddenly tell that slave, okay, now go be a father. Go be a husband. Go get a job. Go work. Well, Master, Master, I don't know how to do that. So you had a lot of men. They gave up their. I mean, there were suicides. There were men just leaving their families. Women fending for themselves. And then there were men who were trying. And then you go down the line. That's when you start going into issues with the alcoholism. It was difficult for men to get jobs. You start going into issues with drugs. There was so much oppression and difficulties that it literally just passed from one generation on to the next. Hardship after hardship. And so I'm not saying it's an excuse to stay there. That's not what I'm saying. But it is not okay for people to not realize and recognize and go, there have been some atrocities that have been committed against a people group, and we've got to begin to understand how can we create ways to help change that mindset. In Scripture it says, be ye therefore transformed by the renewing of your mind. How can we help those that have gone through even from generations past? Because you got people living in the ghetto right now that are on welfare because their mom and daddy were on welfare. Their grandparents was on welfare.
Yeah, I know.
The grandparents before them was on welfare. All they have known is welfare for all their life. I got family members. I know people who never even left, who never flew in a plane.
But see, go to South Arkansas, go to Louisiana, go to Mississippi, and you see white people doing the same thing.
Exactly. And so this is not an argument about white privilege.
I know. I'm just saying.
So let me be clear.
I'm saying that
I'm not saying this is.
that when you talk about all these things, there are also white people that face all those same struggles and oppressions and all of that too.
And I agree with that.
And it does go down. It is generational. It goes down the family line of the white people too.
What we were talking about was the ratio, is what I was
Yeah.
saying. The ratio of which the reason why the statistics are within African American.
Well, I don't think we should even have a welfare system. I think we should turn it all off and say, get a job or starve to death.
I'm for welfare reform. I think we need significant reform because what the welfare system does, I think, is enable.
She's like, what?
What does the Bible say about that? Okay, you were talking about wanting to be Torah observant. Let's read what the Torah has to say about that.
I've decided against that.
You
Okay.
decided to take that part out?
Yeah,
You want to take that part out?
Yeah, in the Torah, they were commanded to help the poor.
Yes.
That is what the storehouse
And Paul
in Malachi
said true
3
religion.
is talking about.
And I don't mind helping the poor, the truly needy. I think that if we're going to help the poor, I would say, okay.
But you're wanting to do away with the welfare system.
Well,
how can you help the poor?
I would
I think
say
it needs to be reformed.
I would say, okay, here's the deal. If you're not working, sorry, you ain't getting nothing. If you are handicapped or disabled, the government will support you because you cannot physically work. If you work at Jack in the Box or Taco Bell or where, at least you're trying. So at least you're trying, and what the government is going to do is supplement your income.
Limited, though. I think it
Yeah.
should be a limited time so that we're seeing that you're making progress. You can't be working for Jack in the Box for 10 years and you're staying a line cook.
Well, I still am like, hey, if you're working for Jack in the Box for 10 years, at least you're working.
But a line cook, no. You
I don't care what you do, and you can be the fry cook.
See, this is the issue with the welfare system, though. That's what I'm saying.
But
it needs to
no,
be
right
reformed.
now it's like, let's have 50 kids and all get on welfare, and we're gonna get more money the more kids we have, and the government can support us.
And the less money we make because we
Yeah.
don't have jobs.
And so they
jobs.
don't, like when you try to go get welfare or food stamps, if you make any money, they will not approve you hardly. But Like my mom,
Well,
for
that's not
example, when my mom and my dad got a divorce, this is way back when, my mom made $3 an hour because that's what minimum wage was then. I'm like, how the?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
But it was $3.75 an hour
Wow.
minimum wage. So she had 3 kids and she was a single mom. So she had to support 3 kids. She tries to go get food stamps. They give her a very limited amount of food stamps. Mind you, she has 3 kids because it was like $100 a month or something. And she's like, and it was back when they had the food stamps, you used the actual little papers. And she's like, how am I going to support my kids? She had to literally make a garden in the backyard and grow food in that garden to feed us in the back of her trailer. Because we lived in a trailer that was not a nice trailer at all, holes in the floor and everything. My parents were very wealthy. They got a divorce. My mom had no education. My father supported the whole family. He just up and left. My mom was like, what am I going to do? And so this is why I say, like, it's not just black people that face those things.
I agree with that.
And I do say, now, yes, my mom went to college and she got an education and she was able to support us and all of that. So thank God for my mother. But she went to go to school. But in the hometown where she's from, in Arkansas, there are people that work at 7-Eleven, and they have been working at 7-Eleven for 30 years, and that's their career. And I'm like, really?
I think it's what Kanye West said. The whole point he said, and a lot of
Now
people.
you're quoting Kanye.
Yeah, I'm gonna quote.
Okay,
Kanye.
we quoting Kanye and TD Jakes and Oprah. Lord Jesus.
Kanye West obviously was he's always been famous, but this thing he said was, created a lot of buzz when he said it. He talked about the whole how, if we were in slavery for 400 years, I think that at some point slavery was a choice. Now, what he meant to say, because he got a lot of flack for that. I don't agree with the way he said it. I think what he was trying to say is that if today we're not bettering ourselves, we're choosing to be enslaved because we have a slave mentality.
Mm-hmm.
The point that I'm making is that as a white person, you simply cannot say that you have any history or anywhere through your bloodline that you knowingly known of through historical facts that the white race has been enslaved in America. You can't say that. So what I'm speaking to is a mindset. I'm not speaking to necessarily the issues and the conditions, and because yes, there are white people and there are black people that have all lived in dire situations. And there are probably some white people more in modern times that have lived in worse off situations than some African Americans. What I am saying is, but the mindset because of a color of one's skin has got to be renewed. And that's what my heart is for the African American community, is that our identity is not in our blackness.
Well, no.
Just like your identity.
My identity is
your
not in my
whiteness.
whiteness. It's
So
in my
our
attitude.
identity.
Just kidding.
Our identity has to come that we have been endowed by our Creator, which I believe is God, who is also Jesus, with gifts and talents, and we're powerful and we're great, and I believe that that's what we've got to begin to. I think that's why Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. talked so much about us as God's children, because he knew that our identity, and he even spoke to this. He spoke about this. Like, our identity can't be in our blackness, because historically, what has our blackness told us and taught us? I'm not saying that we can't be, we can't celebrate, and we can't, what am I trying to say? We can't like, I'm not saying that we can't like that we're black. We ought to love who we are no matter what color we are. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the essence of who I am is not black.
Well,
That's not the
essence of who a
I
white
am.
person is not white.
Exactly.
We should all identify with Christ.
Agreed. And so I think that the conversation has got to be, but we've got to remain compassionate towards what has happened in order to be able to bring people out
And being
of a mindset.
and
I
being
agree.
compassionate. Okay, I cannot, like, when people tell me, "Oh, well, my ancestors were slaves," I'm like, "But you weren't." So I can't relate to that. I can't even have sympathy for that. Really, honestly, I'm being honest. Now, what I can have sympathy for,
Neither do I, by the way.
what I can have sympathy for is my mom has told me stories about in her day, whenever the schools were not segregated, and whenever the desegregation and all that segregation, all that happened, the way that the black people were treated. Now, that was not okay. That was an injustice, and that I can say is wrong. And those people having to sit at, like Rosa Parks, having to sit at the back of the bus, the black people having a certain water fountain, having to sit in the back of the restaurants. My mom's father owned a restaurant. He owned a little cafe, and the black people had to sit in the back of the restaurant. And I'm like, it was like as if they treated the people like that blackness was contagious.
Yeah.
They're going to get something. And like they were animals. Now, that is not okay. I am very much against that. But, and I can say that is an injustice that's happened since I have been, no, not since I've been alive, but it has happened relatively recent where, and I can look at videos and see for myself like, oh my God. And I can listen to people's experiences of growing up then. And like my mom as a little girl, like saying, like wondering, like, why are these people treated this way? Like, I love them. They're nice. And why do they have to sit in the back of the restaurant? Like that's what she wondered, because her dad owned the restaurant and she would go up there. And so she would go in the back with the black people, like, and hang out with them and talk to them. And, you know, that was not okay back then. Like, oh my God, this white little girl, why is she, they might beat her up or something, like crazy. But then, so those things I can identify, I can have sympathy for. I cannot have sympathy for the people that are like, my ancestors were slaves. Well, okay, my ancestors were slaves too, because they're Irish. So,
Right, indentured servants.
you know, like, so get over it. I mean, really? And so, but now I can't, if you tell me my grandmother had to sit in the back of the bus and had to drink water out of a certain water fountain, then that I can get on board with, because
And
that
I
was
agree.
not okay.
I agree. Let me differentiate a little bit of what I'm even saying, because I am.
We have 3 minutes.
Yeah, I'm not for entitlement, because I think there are a lot of African Americans right now who feel like because there's slavery existed and we've been oppressed and we've been through so many hardships as a people, that there's this sense of entitlement that, you know, you as a white person owe me something. No, I don't agree with that, nor do I agree with a mindset of inferiority that I'm less than or this and that. However, I do agree with, or I do want to address the mentality. For instance, I don't know if this has ever happened. You've never said this to me, so you can confirm yay or nay if you want to. But if you've had a mother who was physically abused by, you know, and I'm not saying you, I'm just saying anybody, and you saw it, do you not think that'll emotionally affect you?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Of course.
So if you had heard of a grandmother that you never saw physically abused, but you knew she was physically abused, do you think that'll emotionally affect you?
If it was a grandmother that I had never met and seen in my life,
Yeah.
no, it wouldn't.
But you had heard the stories, the dire hardship.
I might
I'm
think,
talking about gruesome. They've gotten
I
to
might
it.
think that, oh my God, that's horrible, but I would probably not shed a tear because I never have met them. So I don't have any type of emotional relationship with them. And I might be considered cold-hearted for that. But I mean, this is legit radio and I'm just real. Like,
Now-
I mean,
And I get that. So that grandmother she stayed. Let's say she stayed, got beaten. The other mom stayed, got beaten. Now she stayed because her mama stayed and got beaten. And then they have a daughter who does the same thing. She stays with a man who beats her. And she never knew her grandmother, but don't you think that the mindset of that grandmother, that great grandmother, affected obviously her because it passed down from one generation to the next?
Yeah, because they teach each other.
Exactly. And
So-
that's the point that I'm making.
Right.
The point that I'm making is that what has happened from generations past has affected the current generation, whether they experienced it or not. It's affected them on a mentality level.
Right.
And we do and should be compassionate towards that to help bring them out of that mindset and renew their minds. If my daddy wasn't nothing, his daddy wasn't nothing, his daddy wasn't nothing, and from then there back, his daddy was a slave, and then we start moving back forward again, and they start thinking, well, I ain't never going to be nothing.
And they may not even consciously
They
think
might
that.
even consciously think it. It's just, like if
It's
you talk to a
ingrained into them.
psychologist,
Mhm.
you will understand the effects of traumas over family bloodlines and what has happened. I'm starting to see it because I'm in counseling right now, and I talk to a counselor, and I'm realizing what has happened to my father. My father never knew his father. Never knew his father, and I didn't know the man who raised him really well, but he beat my grandmother. And there are things that my father has done to me because of what has happened to him. And that's all he has known. Now, that has happened in white people's lives too. I'm not saying that. But it is different. And I think that is what the point is that I'm not making an excuse and saying, well, you're entitled. But what I am saying is that we've got to begin to look at that and go, how can we pull up and empower people to move past what has happened, to move past the past instead of just dismissing it.
I totally agree.
And that's our time, right?
Yep. All right, everybody. We will be back. We will be back next week with Legit Radio. We will be having Pastor Joseph Moyenya talking about deliverance. Thank you all for tuning in, and make sure that you tune in next week. Have a great night. Has that been muted the whole time?
What?
Go back up. See where it says the volume button is muted?
No, we just can't hear. Our volume